The forces of oppression have finally been defeated. To all the free-spirited people of this vast world, friends of justice and defenders of human dignity, standing before you today as the elected leader of the Kurdistan independence movement, I speak with a heavy heart, but with an unwavering and absolute sense of resolve. Rojava, Kurdistan currently finds itself positioned at one of the most sensitive moments in its modern and contemporary historical narrative. It is a moment whose meaning is profoundly simple, stark, and entirely unvarnished. For a nation that remains without a state of its own, existence or annihilation, the affirmation of the right to self-determination, or a return to the cycle of denial and repression. In recent days, numerous reports have emerged of a siege and intensified attacks against the Kurdish regions under Syrian occupation. It is said that water and electricity have been cut off or restricted, internet access has been disrupted or severed, and there is a serious risk of a humanitarian crisis developing. Kobani, the city that in 2014 became a symbol of ISIS's defeat and historic resistance, is now threatened by a policy of blackout and thirst. Simultaneously, the overall political and military atmosphere across the nation of Syria has entered an extremely tense and fragile phase. Furthermore, there is talk regarding the possibility of short-term ceasefires. There is pressure for forced integration and for arrangements that may appear to promise stability, but in practice reproduce the same logic of exclusion and centralization. But the fundamental truth that the global community urgently needs to hear is this. What is currently happening in Rojava is not merely a straightforward military conflict. This is a systematic effort to break the will of a nation and to return the Kurds to the status of a governed subject, not a political actor, not a political agent. The siege of daily life, the silencing of vital services, the targeting of civilians, and threats of cleansing, whatever name they give it, in essence, it is a policy of elimination. Rojava is not just a geography. It is a bastion of human dignity. Over the course of the past decade, Rojava was not merely a temporary emergency administration, but a profound and enduring political reality. In the very midst of the brutal Syrian civil war, the resilient people of Kurdistan managed to successfully keep alive diverse forms of peaceful social coexistence, inclusive local governance, and the active, essential participation of women in all levels of society. And most importantly, during the hardest years, they stood at the forefront of the fight against terrorism. If today the territorial caliphate of ISIS has collapsed, it is due to the sacrifices of the forces and people who paid a heavy price in Kobani, Rojava, and across Kurdistan. And this is not just history of the past. The issue of prisons and camps related to ISIS remains one of the most fragile security points in the region and even in Europe. Any weakening of Rojava, any security vacuum, and any collapse of order in Rojava can provide an opportunity for the resurgence of terrorist networks. This is a threat not only to the Kurds, but to everyone. Therefore, defending Rojava is not just defending the Kurds. It is defending collective security and the very principle of human dignity. I say this to the world. Silence in the face of water and electricity cuts, city sieges, and threats to civilians is not neutrality, it is complicity. Rojava has the right to defend its people. This right is not just a slogan. It is a fundamental duty to protect civilians and the legitimate right to defend life. But alongside defense, we must also frankly speak about the greater danger. The danger lies in so-called political solutions that are presented as legitimate with words like ceasefire, integration, unity, and territorial integrity, but in practice, they end up reconstructing the same historical logic of occupation, centralization, and denial of the rights of nations. The historical experience of this region is very clear. When central governments and occupying powers are weak, they grant certain concessions, but as soon as they regain their strength, they take those concessions back and, under the common slogans of preserving unity and territorial integrity, return to their policies of assimilation. From here, I must now clearly state a fundamental truth. Autonomy without guarantees is a revocable promise. If the right to local governance is not turned into binding law, an independent institution, a stable budget, an executive mechanism, and measurable international guarantees, then in reality it is merely a political concession, and political concessions are inherently revocable. The central and occupying government of Syria usually operates with a double standard. On one hand, there is hard integration, seizing the remaining pillars of power such as security, resources, borders, the economy, and key dossiers, and transferring them to the center. And on the other hand, there is soft concession, meaning the granting of certain cultural symbols to neutralize political cohesion. The outcome of this pattern is always the same. First, they take away real power, and then they render the symbols meaningless as well. So today's issue is not just about military defense. The main issue is the establishment of rights in a guaranteed and irreversible manner. And now I will bravely state another truth. Defending Rojava without internal criticism borders on propaganda and diminishes its political persuasiveness. Rojava had rare opportunities, but the transformation of field achievements into real statehood and the ultimate institutional authority did not progress fully or as much as historical necessity required. Political cohesion, unified diplomacy, governance, transparency, and institutional engineering must become stronger, more professional, and unbreakable. This criticism is not for blame, but for building the future, whether on the path to guaranteed autonomy or on the path to full self-determination. Now, my message to the Kurdish youth, women and men in Kurdistan, in all 4 parts of Kurdistan, in the diaspora and in Europe is this. Based on the calls issued by Rojava's movements and institutions for civil mobilization, our duty is clear within the framework of the respective laws of the countries in which you reside. Bring the vibrant streets to life. Be the unwavering voice of Kobani, Hasaka, Kamishli, Afrin, and the entire region of Rojava. Public gatherings, protest marches, community meetings, media campaigns, and organized political pressure. These are the essential tools at our disposal. I ask each of you to help break Rojava out of its isolation. Every European city should become a platform for the voice of Rojava. In the language of that country, with a clear message, immediately cease all military attacks on the Kurdish people and innocent civilians. Bring a definitive end to the ongoing blockade of vital services. Accept a comprehensive political process with guarantees. Hold parliaments and governments accountable. Meet with your local representatives. Send letters. Hold meetings. Engage the media. Europe cannot speak of human rights while remaining silent in the face of the threat of a humanitarian disaster. Organize immediate humanitarian aid. Transparent and responsible campaigns to support displaced families, children, the wounded, and vital infrastructure. Water, medicine, fuel, and secure shelter in Rojava must not be surrendered to the ravages of war through starvation. We must work to strengthen the bonds of Kurdish unity. Today is not a day for party rivalry or internal conflict. It is a critical day to save the future of the Kurdish nation. We must set aside differences and grievances to focus on our common goal: protecting people's lives and securing the political rights of the Kurds. The future of all four parts of Kurdistan is interconnected. And my address is to the United States, Israel, the European Union, the United Nations, and the influential international powers. We demand clear and measurable actions, not vague and forgettable statements. A clear condemnation of any attack on civilians and any policy of besieging vital services, along with practical pressure for the immediate restoration of water, electricity, and communications. Support for a political path that guarantees the rights of the Kurds and all communities in Syria. Neither integration without guarantees nor the reproduction of a dictatorship under a new name. Establishing independent mechanisms for investigation, accountability, and preventing impunity for crimes against civilians so that the cycle of repeated violence can end. Recognizing the reality that lasting stability is impossible without the genuine participation of peoples. Any plan that reduces rights to mere symbols only postpones the crisis. The Kurdish nation, the free people of the world, Rojava today is a test of the world's conscience, but before that, it is a test of our own will. If Rojava falls, it is not just a region that falls, but a historic hope that collapses. And if Rojava stands, it is not only the Kurds who win, but humanity and collective security that triumph. So let us say together, Rojava is not alone. The Kurds are not alone. Now is the time to act. With a loud voice, with unity, with legal and organized action, and with humanitarian and political support.